Are you there, Coty?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, Coty Sensabaugh. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Welcome back to the Tri-Cities here. I'm fine here and all. Let's see here. So I had a lot to talk about here, and let's see. In fact, I was going to get about to a Steelers story right here, but it's got to be an exciting time for you. I'm going to bring you on. I've got 20 seconds left on a sports update. I self-produced this show. It's not necessarily like what they do on the Fan 93.7 up there, or Mark Madden, or WBGG. They've got producers. I pretty much am here by myself. But anyway, let's go on and do this here right now here. So come give you an introduction. I'm going to give you a historical note that you may or may not know. Well, we have on the line Coty Sensabaugh, Dobbins-Bennett, and Clemson product, now playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You may not know this, but in the Pittsburgh Steelers' very first game, they had a Dobbins-Bennett product in the game. He was a friend of mine named Bob Seifers. This dates back to the 40s, my friend. I'm not that old, but I had a generational sort of gap friendship, if you will. And he actually went home to the Tri-Cities before their playoff game. There was a player revolt, believe it or not, before that game way back when over whether or not they were going to get paid. Well, I know that's not a problem for you now, Coty Sensabaugh, but you're a Dobbins-Bennett product, and this is a much more positive way to come back to the Tri-Cities. Thank you for coming on the show. I guess I want to ask you first, I know when you signed with the Steelers at the top of this year, you were talking about it being a family, a close-knit group, all of this. Have you found that to be the case a year in to playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Oh, here we go. Let's do this. Yes. You were saying you did find it to be a family.
Absolutely. Yes, correct.
Well, I would say that I know that there were the reports, about James Harrison not being the greatest teammate in the world, so on and so forth. So what can you tell me about, is this the closest team? Because you've played with, I believe, 3 other franchises. What makes playing on this Steelers team special?
Consistency that this program has had from the top to bottom with the owners, the GM, the head coach, position coach. It's just a very close-knit group, everybody on the same page. Trying to reach one goal, and that's the Super Bowl.
Well, I know that that has to be a reason why you signed with a good team like the Steelers and such. But I know you've had a lot of other, let's say, championship outings off the field. You've been giving to charity, and I believe this past year you were actually given a Point of Light. Can you tell us a little bit about your off-season charity that received such great praise?
Pretty much, me and my wife just enjoyed giving back and enjoyed being in the community. We just got recognized for it this past year. It's something that we've been doing since we've been in the league. We never really did it for the recognition. We just did it because we enjoyed it, and it put smiles on our faces and others' faces. Well,
I also want to talk about one person that's actually also getting involved in the community is your cousin Gerald, who played for the Dallas Cowboys, was a starting safety. Have you kept in touch with Gerald Sensabaugh now that you're in the NFL? What's your relationship like with him?
We still as close as we was as kids, man. We're just older now, but we still talk on the regular. He keeps me up to date with everything he has going on, and I keep him up to date with everything I have going on. We're both married now. We have kids. I know he's jumping into the political world now, and I'm still in this football world. So I'm happy with everything he's doing, and I wish him continued success and blessings.
Well, we've had Gerald on. I know you've got to be familiar with some of the, the suspension from David Crockett High School and such when he had the team to a 5-2 record, and then the suspension came and the Pioneers kind of went in the tank after that. So, Coty Sensabaugh, what has he told you? What about that circumstance? How has he kept a positive atmosphere? Has he told you that he'd like to return to football coaching even if he is working in politics?
We really didn't get into that too much. He just told me it was an unfortunate situation because the kids were affected by it.
Sure.
Those guys were 5-2 when it happened, and then after that, I think they maybe won one game, right?
I believe they may have won one, but yeah, they fell into the tank soon afterwards. And it's a shame. Nick Lingerfeld, who's a friend of the show and a friend of mine, took over. And I've known him from back when, but even so, he was put into a tough position, obviously, by the administration there at Dobbins-Bennett. We're talking to Coty Sensabaugh. He is the cousin of Gerald, but he's also playing in the NFL playoffs. And you know, keeping a positive mindset and such. Look, I want to go and talk a little bit about the charity that you did do on your honeymoon, because it is a great story, and I know you were downplaying it, but your wife Dominique, you were handing out shoes to people in the Dominican Republic. I know in the Dominican Republic 82% of the people are on some sort of public assistance. When you went down the Dominican, what did you see? What was different about life there than, say, life in Kingsport?
It was very different. I mean, a lot of people in those communities didn't have the basic necessities like clothes and shoes. A lot of them didn't have water. Just the basic things that we take for granted. That was a very eye-opening experience for me and my family members and friends that went, and it changed our lives forever. It just puts everything in perspective. It just forces you to be thankful for every single day, because you never know. There's always somebody out here with less than you have.
Well, I want to ask you, I mean, what percentage did you find living in such poverty? Because I know we're both, you know, from East Tennessee, and if you go out into the hollers and all this, you'll find people that have less, you know, that sort of thing, and may also have some, you know, problem with running water, that sort of thing. I mean, the old idea going to the well and such, not so much in this country in this day and age. But there are still reports of poverty in Appalachia and such. What is the difference, in your opinion, poverty in Appalachia between, say, poverty in the Dominican Republic?
I would just say, you know, basically it's a third world country over there.
Mm-hmm.
Have the resources. Like you could probably take a TV over there. Probably more than half the people over there wouldn't know what that is.
Really? Wow.
They live a very basic, like in the communities that I was in. I'm sure there's some more upscale communities where they have everything that we have.
Well, what community were you in down there in the Dominican Republic?
To be honest with you, I don't remember. Because I'm not very good with Spanish. I would have to go back and
Sure. Was it near the Haitian border?
Yes, it was right by the Haitian border, because a funny story, they actually thought my father, one of the guys that was showing us around, actually thought my dad was of Haitian descent. A lot of people between the DR and Haiti don't get along for some reason, and they're right by each other, so I think that's an unfortunate, ironic situation.
There is a big cultural divide. I'm a former minor league baseball broadcaster, Coty Sensabaugh, so I've met and talked with many Dominican players over the years and such. And yeah, I mean, just think of it. Dominican Republic, you do think a lot of sports, especially baseball. Haiti, not so much. And the culture is obviously very French in Haiti. I don't know, does your father speak French? Could that be a reason why they thought he was of Haitian descent?
Not at all. We were actually, the city we were in the DR was Puerto Plata, but I don't remember the distinct neighborhoods, but that's the city that we were in.
Okay, Puerto Plata here. We're talking to Coty Sensabaugh. He is preparing for a playoff game with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It won't be this weekend. They're waiting to see who they will play. It will either be, well, let's see here. If the Chiefs win, then it will likely be the Jacksonville Jaguars, assuming that they beat the Bills. But if the Bills win, then I guess the winner of the Chiefs and Titans game would be coming to Pittsburgh. Let's talk about that. You're a former Tennessee Titan. You had a pick six against Marcus Mariota in the game against them this year. Was that your season highlight?
I would say my season highlight has been us going 13-3. This is the first team I've been on that's ever had that good of a record in a regular season, so I would say that's been my highlight of the season so far.
Well, I know that you are a survivor. I mean, you've been with many NFL teams. You on December 4th, for instance, I believe against the Bengals. I know that player that a lot of people around here know, Cam Sutton, replaced you in the lineup and such. What do you expect your role to be playing in the playoffs here for the Steelers?
I think it's still unveiling itself. You know, I just prepare every week to
All right. Coty Sensabaugh with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Dobbins Bennett product. I'll go and take you back to Kingsport. I asked you what your favorite memory was this year, and you mentioned team accomplishments, but is there a favorite individual sports memory that you remember from playing for the Indians?
Probably say achieving 1,000. I scored over 1,000 points in my career in basketball. I was actually 1 point shy of tying my one of my childhood Kingsport idols, and that was Shane Carnes.
Mm-hmm.
That was a cool moment for me, because I remember as a kid I used to always tell him I was going to be better than him. Obviously, he went to the University of Tennessee on a basketball scholarship, so I would say he ended up better than me in basketball, but I wasn't far behind, I guess.
But being in the NFL is not bad either, I would say. Was there any thought of you playing basketball collegiately instead of football? Why did you choose football?
Ironically, my cousin Gerald, it was probably after my sophomore or junior year playing basketball, he took me over to ETSU to play with the basketball team. We played pickup basketball with those guys, and he was in the NFL by this time. But I went over with those guys, and that was kind of a measuring stick for me. And I did decent against those guys, but I didn't feel I did anything specifically to stand out. So at that moment in time, I made my decision, like, yeah, I better start taking this football thing seriously. I think I can take it further than the hardwood. So that's actually when I made my decision, ironically.
We're talking to Coach.
Like 16 or 17 years old.
16 or 17, and certainly Gerald being a football player and seeing what was that understands. I do want to ask you here, as you're preparing, you've got a bye week this week. It's a time to heal. It's a time to rest. Now, oftentimes teams in this situation, they'll have more of more rest going into the playoffs, figuring, look, if you don't have it after 16 games and 13 victories, you're not going to get it, and we think that you have. Has there been more rest this week for the Steelers than in past weeks preparing for games?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
A little bit more downtime without knowing who we're playing, per se, so we haven't been game planning as much, but we've still been working the same and working on our individual skill sets and focusing on the things we can't control. And then next week, we'll know who we're playing exactly, and we can lock in on that specific opponent.
Well, I've been to the facility on the south side, so I'm sure you've been practicing on the bubble, coming out the front door rather than the open, the practice fields and the outdoors with the cold through the back door of the UPMC facility. But let me ask you, how do you prepare for a football game when you don't know who the opponent is going to be?
You focus on yourself and what you and your teammates do best, and just continue to sharpen your sword. Then, when you lock in on the opponent, you just add that component to it.
Let me say, okay, Coty Sensabaugh, Dobbins Bennett product. We're in our final stages of the interview. He's joining us here from Pittsburgh and such. The Steelers this year, they're second in sacks. I believe they're the only team that is averaging fewer than 100 yards rushing allowed and 200 yards passing allowed. So it's been a dominant defense this year. What's been the key?
A lot of different guys making a lot of plays week in and week out. I feel it's one of the best defenses I've been a part of, and we're just trying to transition to the playoffs and hopefully keep that rolling.
All right. Coty, I do want to ask you, I guess the bad part of this season, the worst loss that the Steelers face, and it's a criticism that they've had of playing to the level of the opponent, is the loss of the Chicago Bears way back in September. What would you say to critics who complain about the Steelers playing to the level of their opponent? Should you have been more dominant in some of these games against, say, the Colts, the Packers, even the Browns this past week, than what the Steelers have been?
Everybody has their own opinion, and it's okay. We just focus on what we can focus on, and we can't control what happened in September. All we can do is control what happens in January and February.
Well, one of the things about the Steelers historically is, and you know this, getting past the New England Patriots. Certainly they came to Tynes Field last month, won a controversial game, but a lot of people were critical. Rob Gronkowski in the final drive seemed to be wide open on at least 3 passes. How did Gronkowski get so open in that game?
He's a good receiver with one of the best quarterbacks of all time. They made a couple more plays than we made. back in the lab preparing for the opportunity if it comes about again. But first we have to take care of Kansas City, Jacksonville, or Tennessee, whichever one comes up here. And then, maybe we'll see them later on.
Okay, we're talking to Coty Sensabaugh, and one last question here before we let you go. I know that one of the criticisms of letting him open and all this is that there wasn't enough man coverage played. Has there been more of an emphasis in playing playing man for the Steelers these past few weeks in practice?
I think it's something we've been working on all year. Some weeks we play it more than others, but we have a pretty versatile defense. I think our numbers show that with, the number of sacks, the number of interceptions, the number of rushing yards allowed, and passing yards allowed. So I think this defense does a little bit of everything.
Well, statistically, I think that you are the team to beat in the AFC. So, Coty Sensabaugh, thanks for joining us here on Tri-City Sports Now.
All right, thank you for having me.
No, thank you, and it's a great pleasure and all that. I'm from Pittsburgh myself, so I'm like you, I guess, from Pittsburgh.